The northwest and southwest regions, the two predominantly English-speaking parts of Cameroon, expected to operate differently under the General Code of Regional and Local Authorities, a special status, House of Chiefs, and an independent conciliator explained tonight. The education community envisaging a smooth start of the 2020-2021 school year amidst the coronavirus scare, the controversy in admissions in the government schools, and the quest to educate in spite of the health challenge. The two indomitable Lions shortlisted for training in the Netherlands by head coach Antonio Conceição da Silva. The comeback of Clinton J and Nicolas Nkulu, plus the discernible absences, will be presented in this newscast. Good evening and thanks for joining us. Those were the headlines of the 7:30 news.
Each of us must comply with the measures that have been taken.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. The General Code of Regional and Local Authorities, which provides for the status of local elected officials and special regulations applicable to certain local authorities, harps on the functioning of the Northwest and Southwest regions. Beyond financial autonomy, as well as the administrative independence, both regions are expected to operate differently from the other 8 predominantly French-speaking regions. Ebenezer Akanga explains.
The bottom line of the socio-political crisis in the Northwest and Southwest regions is that the two regions want some degree of autonomy in the management of their own affairs. This preoccupation is catered for in the special status granted to the two regions. The special status is contained in Part 5, Chapter 1 of the General Code of Regional and Local Authorities. Section 327, Sub 2 of the Code states that the special status shall confer on the Northwest and Southwest regions a specific organizational and operational regime based on the historical, social, and cultural values of these regions with due respect for the primacy of the state and national unity and solidarity. With the special status, the two regions have been given the powers to plan and execute their own development.
Because these regional assemblies will now be functional, they have the powers, they will have the means to be able to accelerate the development of the Northwest and Southwest. If they want to build a road between two cities, between two villages, they have the power to do so. If they want to build a bridge between two villages, they have the power to do so. If they want to set up a primary school or a health district in any village, they have the power to do so. You can see the powers that are there.
The Anglophone regions, therefore, have every interest to take part in the upcoming regional council elections so as to materialize the special status that provides answers to most of their worries.
The House of Chiefs is another provision in the General Code of Regional and Local Authorities peculiar to the Northwest and Southwest regions. It takes into consideration the historical and cultural identity of the people and outlines the role that the House of Chiefs will play in fostering people development-oriented policies. Kilian Ndandifon tells us more.
The House of Chiefs is instituted in the Northwest and Southwest regions within the framework of regional councils is part of the special status provisions within a historical and cultural context that has transcended pre- and post-colonial periods.
In pre-colonial Cameroon, these traditional leaders commanded the support, the loyalty, and the respect of a majority of their subjects. When the Germans came, they made use of these traditional rulers. The British instituted the colonial policy of indirect rule, and this permitted them to create what was referred to as native administration.
The missions of the House of Chiefs, considered as one of the 4 assemblies in the new dispensation, are multifaceted.
Section 337 and 338 of the General Code on Regional and Local Authorities. They have opinion on the status of traditional chiefdoms, administrative and legal issues, population issues, educational issues, health issues, financial issues.
Even if critics describe the regional assemblies as a kind of a policy of containment, the intention is to seek solutions to current national problems, some of which threaten national unity.
Another component of the code has to do with an independent conciliator or an ombudsman in the Northwest and Southwest regions. Amongst his missions is the peaceful handling of disputes between the public and the administration to guarantee that a full participation in local governance is obtained. Joyce Kimbi-Fuaju in the following report highlights the task of the independent conciliator.
Duties of the public independent conciliator operating within the decentralized territorial councils include resolving amicably any dispute between the public and the administration, also defend and protect the rights and liberties of its citizens, as well as carry out inquiries on how regional and communal services are functioning. As to its scope of competence, the decentralized local regional councils have their powers within regional and local public administrations, as well as regional and local services, establishment and enterprises operating within its jurisdiction. But there are no-go zones. These decentralized territorial councils are excluded from state public services such as governor's offices, divisional or subdivisional offices, amongst others. Public enterprises and establishments created or run by the state are also out of its scope of competence. Without being exhaustive, the public independent conciliator within the decentralized territorial councils has well-defined attributes.
On to one of our top stories. In 3 weeks, classes will resume for the 2020-2021 school year, and tonight we'll begin a series of reports to pave the way for a smooth start. It will be an unusual school year owing to the coronavirus pandemic, which led to the premature end of the previous school year. But for examination classes who took official exams, other pupils were evaluated on the basis of 4 sequences. Beatrice Lawsamba presents context of the reopening and the political vision to promote education in Cameroon.
With the ongoing coronavirus pandemic, school resumption in October is bound to be unusual. Temperature checks, mask wearing, hand washing regimens, respect of social distancing measures, consistent with the country's overall COVID-19 health response to help protect students, staff, and teachers. What puts an extra strain in a period well known for putting everyone on edge? But far from having to battle with fears, Cameroonians seem confident they can reopen schools safely, having experimented how last June when examination classes resumed following a 3-month suspension of classes to complete the school year. As the country flashes back to that time, it counts it worthy of praise, the head of state's daring political decision to resume classes even as the battle against the global enemy continued fiercely. The education community, which defied fears and heeded to the head of state's call for classes to resume, also deserves an accolade. Thanks to this symbiosis of effort, the last academic year was not wasted. It explains the confidence Cameroonians have that although going back to school will likely look a little different from what obtained before, maintaining COVID-19 measures that count will indeed count for the success of the new academic year.
Guardians and parents seeking admission for their children into some government schools are having a tough time getting enrolled due to tightened procedures. The majority of school officials have opted for competitive tests before admission and are bound to respect the number of pupils per class as prescribed by the law. However, suspicions of corruption and favoritism linger on in the sector. Constantine Baum has been finding out for the 7:30 News.
The notice boards do carry the necessary information needed by parents as the respective fees are clearly specified. Those who come to pay, especially returning students, have no problem as the bursars are available.
We don't walk out of the norms of the minister. For the Form 1s, they have written interview into Form 1, and those who have passed have been selected. The results have been published, and I believe that we are taking not more than 50 per class.
From the explanation, one could say the government has succeeded to make the registration and admission procedures corrupt-free. But to the man on the street, it is a reality.
Into Form 1, I think they always take 50 or 100,000 francs.
many times and the government has not succeeded to stop it. There are children who failed entrance examinations into Form 1, but finally they still get a place in class. It is real and very evident envelopes do change hands. How can you say it is not real? Teachers play a big role in it as they search for clients. I paid 125,000 francs to secure a place for my daughter.
It is not this reporter's place to conclude whether it is a myth or reality, but you watching at home as a parent can be the best judge.
And it is worth mentioning that it is forbidden to bribe in order to have your kids enrolled. Note that. In higher education sector, a partnership agreement has been signed between Cameroon Telecommunications Camtel and the ministry in charge of institutions of higher learning. The Minister of State, Professor Jacques Famendongo, signed on behalf of the ministry and state universities, while Judith Achede signed for Camtel Chidirex. As Board and Summer reports, the entente will guarantee the provision of high-quality internet services.
They append their respective signatures, paving the way for a fruitful partnership between Camtel and the Ministry of Higher Education, as this framework agreement aims at promoting national higher education network prescribed by the head of state. Camtel makes available high-quality internet services and electronic communication services to the different states' universities.
Take advantage, of the digital economy. And to basically develop the country. That's what we did. And giving this internet access to university is really part of our mission. And it's going to enable e-learning and a lot of new possibilities for the students.
With over 1.5 billion debts states universities owe Camtel, they say this framework agreement will digitally transform the university sector and furnish the central services of the Ministry of Higher Education and the different states' universities. Each university head received copies of the framework agreement ready to let it go operational.
In our running series, we spotlight the Made in Cameroon brand and the prowess of the country's culinary arts. Local chefs, through their ingenuity and passions for cooking, have been making available delicacies appealing and accessible to consumers. One of such schemes is providing inhabitants, wherever they are, with ready-to-cook edibles. Clarice Aritakan tells us more.
Care for some bread made from plantain flour, or why not cakes and other pastries made from cassava, millet, rice or sweet potato flour. They are amongst the wide variety of Cameroonian goodies which are slowly but surely becoming part of the feeding habits of many consumers.
The products are of good quality and well preserved.
Amongst the latest trends to make local products more accessible are ready-to-use edibles. Vegetables, fruits, roots, tubers, grains or pulses, and the list is almost endless. Supermarket shelves which display these products are steadily gathering a faithful customer base.
It makes cooking easy, especially for workers. When you're tired, you want things done fast. That's why I like the peanut butter. It's also well preserved.
We
are sure of the quality because we know where it comes from and what goes into it. We don't usually have time to do a lot of things back home.
The finished products vary, and so too the processing techniques used to obtain them. For many a consumer, deciding what to get between foreign and local, the choice, they confess, is readily made in Cameroon.
The African Technological and Intellectual Property Day is being commemorated with the role of intellectual property offices in Africa and Cameroon highlighted. This was at a forum chaired by the Secretary of State in the Ministry of Mines, Industries and Technological Development, Fu Callistus Gentry. In the following excerpt, the Director of Technological Development and Industrial Property, Mr. Babndom, underscores the assistance given to pharmaceutical industries to fight against the coronavirus. Take a listen.
Our pays put in their disposal technical assistance and such as financial help to assist them in their research. Our inventors and others researchers, we have, for example, a team from Chang University who are benefiting the help of the government to put in the local market products as artificial respirators in order to help patients in our hospital.
Over to the South region, members of the Parliamentary Network for the Sustainable Management of Forest Ecosystems in Central Africa, REPA, are working on a legal framework on the forestry sector in Cameroon. This is at a 5-day information and capacity building seminar organized in partnership with the Forest Environment Program of the German Development Corporation, GIZ. Details in this report with Clarence Aze.
For the 6 days, the over 90 members of Cameroon's National Assembly and the Senate will be schooled on environmental issues and the legal framework of the forest sector in Cameroon. They will also discuss the international commitments of Cameroon in terms of sustainable forest management and the current situation of forest management in Cameroon.
As members of parliament, we have an obligation to equip ourselves with skills and address the urgency of the moment, which is to say the sustainable management of our forest resources.
The first Vice President of the National Assembly, Honorable Hilarion Etong, while opening the workshop, said the preservation of the environment and the 22 million hectares of forest, which constitute 48% of the country's surface area, is a constant preoccupation to the state. He also saluted the German Development Corporation, GIZ, for supporting the parliamentary network in the initiative, which is expected to equip the parliamentarians to continue with their fight for sustainable forest management and conservation of Cameroon's rich biodiversity.
The wearing of face masks in public places will be mandatory until further notice.
One of the symptoms of the coronavirus on patients is a running nose, but there is a difference between a common cold and a COVID-19 related cold. How is this differentiated? Many Cameroonians are at a loss. To get expert answers, we take you to the Public Health Emergency Operations Center, where Baldwin Sama is standing by with his guest, Dr. Eric Tandy. Hi, Baldwin. How do I tell that the cold I have is not as a result of the coronavirus?
Good evening to you, Esther. It's a complicated question for me to answer, and that's what we shall be discussing with Dr. Eric Tandy, given that most Cameroonians have suffered from a common cold, and others who've suffered from a cold that happens to be one of the symptoms of COVID-19. Those who've suffered from a common cold have been quite worried and scared, thinking that maybe they have one of those symptoms of COVID-19. What's the difference between the two? I'll ask those questions to Dr. Eric Tandy, who is a public health expert. Good evening, doctor.
Good evening, everybody.
Tell us, what's the difference between a common cold and a cold that happens to be one of the symptoms of COVID-19?
Okay, but just like you rightly said, it's quite a complex question. Complex in the sense that it's human-specific in certain cases. You know, most of the symptoms or most of those who are suffering from COVID-19 have proved one of the signs or symptoms of COVID-19, which is the common cold. But to tell you the truth here, to draw the cutting razor between this is just to go in for a diagnosis, because without a confirmed laboratory test, you cannot draw a cutting razor between a normal flu or a flu that is related to COVID-19, because at all times you might produce one of the signs or symptoms.
And a health professional that you are, what would be that advice? Any people suffering from either the common cold or the one related to COVID-19?
The best advice is that once you notice any of these signs or symptoms, just simply go to the nearest health facility or diagnostic center and confirm your status as far as COVID-19 is concerned. Do not hesitate and assume that you have a normal cold, or do not also assume and be scared that you have a confirmed COVID-19 cold. So for you to clear your mind, simply go for a diagnostic test. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Eric Tanzi. It's simple. Go and have yourself screened. If you are suffering from a cold, don't get disturbed whether it's a common cold or it happens to be the cold that happens to be one of the symptoms of COVID-19. And public health experts use this opportunity to remind Cameroonians to continue respecting all these barrier measures, especially during this particular period when we're in the days ahead we'll be having the back to school. That will happen to be one of those opportunities through which the virus will be spread. Respect of barrier measures is quite key to stop the spread of COVID-19 in Cameroon. Back to you, Esther Kima.
Thanks very much, Borden Summer. If you got a persistent cold, then go get tested for COVID-19. Now on to politics. The national president of the Cameroon National Salvation Front has donated a consignment of food items to flood victims in Marua. In a ceremony at the Yaya Dairu Stadium, the 3,000 bags of rice from Issa Chiroma Bakari and the MP for Diamari Center, Honorable Salman Ali, were handed over by the vice president of the party, Usmaru Aman Salali. Henry Tato Ekambi tells us more from the Far North region.
The floods showed them no mercy, but the Cameroon National Salvation Front, FSNC, has extended a hand of fellowship to the flood victims through 3,000 bags of rice worth 39 million CFA francs. The 1,432 families chosen in Marua could not help but appreciate the gesture.
I am pleased with the gift. Each time we are met with difficulties, he doesn't hesitate to give a helping hand.
The National Vice President Usmanu Aman Sali, who was representing the National President, says the gesture is to show they are with the populace in good or bad times. The regional coordinator of the FSNC, Honorable Salmana Amadou Ali, told the victims in a highly emotional speech that he will never cease to plead for their cause so that their needs can be met.
And on today's obituary, the late Commissioner for Public Security in Nanga Eboko, Ferdinand Tukov Jodzela, has been laid to rest in Buea. During military honors at the 5th Mobile Intervention Unit in Buea, the Southwest Regional Delegate for Public Security, Jean-Marie Dienga, described him as a devoted and a patriotic police officer. Details with Tanjong Levis Agbo.
Commissioner Ferdinand Tukov Jodzela remained silent last month at the age of 57. As Commissioner for Public Security, his colleagues in the military corps gave him military honors at the esplanade of the 5th Mobile Intervention Unit in Buea. In strict military style, he was posthumously decorated as a devoted, dynamic and patriotic person who served his country while in active service. Eulogies presented at the St. Martin the Porres Catholic Church Bukwango describe him as a humble, peaceful husband and father who was attached to the values of piety. The Southwest Regional Delegate of Public Security, Jean-Marie Duinga, and other top military officials were present to bid farewell and pay their last respect to their colleague who died in active service. Commissioner Ferdinand Tukov Jodzela, who hails from Bui Division of the Northwest region, had served as Chief of Service in charge for the maintenance of order at the Regional Delegation of Public Security for the Northwest region. Until his death, he served as Commissioner for Public Security in Nanga Eboko in the Center region. He leaves behind his family and friends to mourn him.
May his soul rest in peace. We'll now take a reading of this press release from the Ministry of Defense on the very high instructions of the Head of State, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. The Minister Delegate at the Presidency in charge of Defense will preside on Tuesday, the 15th of September 2020 from 11 a.m. at the Pre-Deployment Peacekeeping Operations Training Center in Mochibum, Opanyong Division in the East Region. The ceremony of handing over of the national colors to the 7th Cameroonian contingent of the United Nations multi-dimensional integrated stabilization mission in the Central African Republic, MINUSCA. It is signed by the Minister Delegate at the Presidency of the Republic in charge of Defense, Joseph Betty Asomom. On to sports. The list of 32 indomitable lions shortlisted to camp from October 5 to 13 in the Netherlands is public. Amongst those selected by head coach Antonio Conceição da Silva are Clinton Jer and Nicolas Nkulu, making their comeback to the den. Meanwhile, as Borden Summer reports, Christian Basogog, Arnaud Djoum and George Constant Manjek are conspicuously absent.
He is the greatest satisfaction of the 32-man shortlist of Antonio Conceição da Silva. Nicolas Nkulu will be making his return into the Lions' Den after he last defended the nation's colours at the 2017 Africa Cup of Nations. Also making his comeback is striker Clinton Jie, who had been sidelined from the national football team of Cameroon for the last 1 year. Dropped from the list of regular players called to camp is 2017 AFCON MVP Christian Bassogog. Among those making their debuts with the indomitable Lions of Cameroon are goalkeepers Blondie Nuke of Stoke City in the English Premier League, Boris Essele of Bourg-Péronas in France, midfielders Ivan Neyu, Brice Eteki, William Dengue, while fresh attackers like Serge Tabekou and Ayungbo have been called to camp. The regulars of the team in the different compartments have been retained. In all, there are 4 goalkeepers, 10 defenders, 8 midfielders and 10 attackers called to camp, with a training camp to run from October 5 to 13 this year and will be spiced with an international friendly against Japan on October 9.
And still in sports, the Court of Arbitration for Sports has restored the rights of organizing the Professional Football Championship in Cameroon to the Professional Football League. The decision was taken after the Football League filed an appeal following its suspension by the Executive Committee of the Cameroon Football Federation, FICAFOOT, on the 3rd of September 2019. The league will receive 5,000 Swiss francs or some 3 million CFA francs for its legal costs, and the decision of the FICAFOOT committee is now null and void. And with that, we'd end this edition of the 7:30 News. But before we go, a recap of our major stories. The Northwest and Southwest regions, the 2 predominantly English-speaking parts of Cameroon, are expected to operate differently under the General Code of Regional and Local Authorities, a special status. The House of Chiefs and an independent conciliator in these regions were explained on this edition of the 7:30 News. And in our other top story, the education community envisages a smooth start of the 2020-2021 school year amidst the coronavirus scare, the controversy in admissions into government schools, and the quest to educate in spite of the coronavirus health challenge came up on this 7:30 News. And just like we ended on sports, 32 indomitable lions have been shortlisted for training in the Netherlands by head coach Antonio Conceição da Silva. The comeback of Clinton Jie and Nicolas Nkulu, plus the discernible absences, were presented. On tonight's edition at 8:30 p.m., join Romeo Chuse for the news in the French language. Tomorrow I'll be back at 7:30 p.m., God willing. Thanks for watching the 7:30 News. Good night and stay tuned to our program. Stay safe. The coronavirus is real.
In this connection, we should avoid stigmatizing.
CRTV News, ici, toute l'info.